This table talk discussion on assimilating the transfer will be led by Mr. Scott, Conductor of St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church and School in Brookfield, Illinois, where he teaches grades 3 through 8. Also leading the discussion will be Reverend Rebekah Koester, Principal of Christ Lutheran School in Sterling, Illinois, and Mrs. Rebekah Koester, who has served as the Mathematics Chair at St. Paul's Lutheran School in Brookfield, Illinois. Please welcome them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coleman. Before we begin, I would like to also credit our headmaster, Mr. David Hall, who is unable to be here today. A lot of what we are sharing with you today comes from him, but he is not able to be here. He and his wife are attending to some time-sensitive family matters, and he sends his regrets. Today's discussion is not prompted by any kind of graduate-level scholarly paper that I've written, not like the last 2 times I've spoken at this conference. It is going to be the product of the School of Experience. We've experienced a bump in enrollment in the wake of public school shutdowns, and maybe you did too. The 3 of us here have been, or were at St. Paul's Brookfield long enough to see new students enroll both pre and post 2020, and we've had some successes. We've made some mistakes too, and we're here to show off our scars. So let's redeem the time by learning from all the above. First thing, so our talk is going to focus in 5 areas. 1, we're going to talk about some definitions. 2, we're going to talk about admissions policies for beginning and mid-year transfer students. We're going to talk about schedule implications, because new students do have implications for the way you are going to teach them, especially when they come in with deficiencies. Maybe not deficiencies, but maybe they've never had Latin or daily chapel or catechism before. Memory work, religion, catechesis is the 4th one, and then the impact on the culture of the school. I would direct you to your handout, which if you scan the code, that would get to you in PDF form. I have that same QR code on the music stand at that entrance, and there are extras of the handout possibly. Assimilation. I have 3 definitions for you on the handout. Let's look at the vocabulary.com one in the middle. Whether you're talking about ideas or nutrients, assimilation describes the act of taking something in and absorbing it fully. Assimilation comes from assimilationem, meaning likeness or similarity. People of different backgrounds and beliefs undergo assimilation when, through living together, they come to see themselves as part of a larger community, or when a small group is absorbed into and made part of a bigger group, such as the Irish immigrants in America in the 19th century. And then briefly, I would like to touch on the Webster's Dictionary 1828.com definition, the act of bringing to a resemblance. What do we want these students to resemble? Now, of course, if you're anything like me, if you hear the word assimilation, you might be thinking about the Borg. How many of you instantly thought of the Borg? Yes, I'm not alone. Told you. So yes, the Borg from Star Trek: The Next Generation, one of the best new villains they ever had in the series. They're cybernetically augmented humanoids who kidnap from other worlds and turned into drones connected to a hive mind. They use an assimilation process. It's purely predatory. Is that what it is in Lutheran schools? Some would say yes, maybe. I would say no. But God will get his saints when and where he will. We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own, unless you're a Calvinist. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile. Very often the conversation topic comes up in the original series in Star Trek universe, each of these different alien species represents some kind of geopolitical force in the United States. I think the Borg actually is a perfect picture of putting children in front of screens. Resistance is futile. They do become mindless drones, it seems. So those are some basic ideas on assimilation. I should also say transfer student. That's probably the easiest one to do. It's a student at your school whose formal education began elsewhere. I think that's pretty simple, right? Okay. Less of me, more of them. We're going to get to admissions and those ideas. I'm going to cover a couple of ideas from Mr. Hall, Dave Hall. We at St. Paul's have had an administration that's been working to incentivize on-time registration instead of dropping kids into our school after they tested the water somewhere else, and it's like, ooh, we're not going to do that. It creates waves in our school when students are dropped in maybe the second week of school, and it's rough. So one of the things that our administration has tried to do is sweeten the pot just a little bit so that these students who are maybe on the fence, parents on the fence as well, are going to register right away and as early as possible. And also, the Board of Christian Education has been adamant of late that we are not to be known as a school of last resort, because we've had opportunities to learn that there are some families that come to us because nowhere else has worked. And those are some of the times that we've taken our lumps, and good admissions processes can help screen that out. And at that point, I'm going to pass it to Pastor Koester.
So I was never the main administrator at St. Paul's as pastor there. I know Dave fairly well, and he's only been the headmaster himself at St. Paul's for 1 year and has had to develop some of these things on his own, and he sent a list of questions that are on your handout there regarding our admission, St. Paul's admissions policies, to ensure that we get the right students at our school, trying to make sure we're assimilating them into Lutheran culture rather than the other way around. So at St. Paul's, the headmaster has a huge role in the admissions screening process, and so the board and other teachers may be involved depending on the circumstances. In his case, he sits down with each of the parents as they come in, and here are the questions you see before you that he asks. What are your views on Christianity? Are you concerned about the current state of public schools? Have you ever considered homeschooling your child? Why would you like your child to attend a private Christian school? How did you hear about St. Paul's? Are you a member of an LCMS congregation? Are you familiar with Luther's small catechism? What are your academic goals for your child? What were your child's previous academic achievements? Are you familiar with classical education? Do you want to enroll your child at our school so that he or she will improve academically or behaviorally? And how does your child behave at school and at home? So, as mentioned, these are relatively new questions, and we aren't the experts, so I guess at this point we'd like to ask if you have suggestions for improvement on those questions, or if you have other questions that you found that worked really well, that not just because we want to know more, but that we might all help each other. So other thoughts on such admissions questions you might ask?
I think some type of question of how they would hope the teacher and they as a family, or teachers and they as a family, would interact, understand monitor expectations and set expectations with the administration and the staff. It is very helpful.
Sure.
Can I just ask, what's the intention of question 3 of have you ever considered homeschooling your child? Just curious about that.
I can't directly speak to the intention because unfortunately I wasn't able to talk to Mr. Hall about that. But we've had in the past year assimilated 2 students who had been homeschooled. And it was an interesting conversation. I'm only looking at this from the outside. There was a convincing process to get them to come to our school instead of continue homeschooling. I wasn't privy to the details on that, but I think if it were me asking the question, this is seat of my pants. It's like, you want to change in your child's education. How far are you going to go? And where are we on that spectrum?
So I think in that case, the mother wanted to homeschool and the father didn't. And he had enough sway, but then they fell in love with the school, and the mother's pretty glad that she sent them there.
And I'm very glad that they're myself.
Yes.
They're excellent students.
But there's another family the year earlier who also came after doing some homeschooling, and that was an experimental process, and the kids got behind because she didn't know quite how to keep up. And great for those who can homeschool and do keep up, but not everybody knows how to do that right away, at least. So there's a positive side to that question and a potential negative side to that question. I'm not quite sure if that's what his,
I'm just curious.
yeah.
A couple that we ask are sort of covered by these are more directly, has your child ever had a problem with being removed from another school? Right? And sometimes they have for reasons that we're not as concerned about, and so but that's good to know. And then very different question, what is your family's devotional life? It's kind of, does the home life match what we're trying to do here?
Sure. As far as the first one, I'm surprised Dave didn't have that one on here. I know we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, that second one, very good, very, very valuable, and can give an insight into how they might fit into the catechesis, chapel, maybe even memorization aspect of classical education.
And if I may insert one other one that we discussed last night, very often we get non-Lutheran students. If there is a church involved, this is a Joshua Gibbs question that he asks to, or he has prompted in an article for hiring teachers at a classical school. What do you think of your church? I think that's equally applicable to students coming in and their parents.
I think I would ask, why are you changing schools?
Sure.
Because that tells a lot, just asking that question. Why now? Why are you changing schools? What's going on?
Very good.
That's one of the first ones that we ask, and particularly if they're transferring at semester.
Yes.
There's usually a pretty good reason why they're transferring at semester. Because just like you guys, we do not want to be a depository for repository.
Yeah. Being on the receiving end of such students without being involved in the admissions process myself over the last couple of years, as the pastor there, I spent a lot of time with the kids at lunch and sometimes, depending on their age, in class and maybe other opportunities, but I was
with the staff.
it's always one of my fact-finding missions what do you as the child, what's your perspective on why you're here and what's your history? And because I've never always had the answers to those questions, but yeah. Anything else? All right. So Dave's comments continue. How does the goal is to see how a child's family, the parents that fit in, what will the role of the child be in the classroom, the role of the parents be in rearing up the children, cooperating with the teachers, and not just in volunteer ways, but of course helping the student at home in addition to the teaching they're getting at school. So Scott terms it that, I think that's SG, is
Yeah, that's me.
According
to Luther. According to Luther, we're their subcontractors.
So, homework is an important tool to teach responsibility. It helps promote learning at home and gets parents involved. And homework is a huge difference between what we as classical Lutheran teachers are aiming to do compared to the public schools. It can vary drastically. How much experience do the kids have with that? What expectations are there? So will the parents be involved in quizzing students on their memory work? We'd like to see the church invading the home in such a way as that, so that we might be assimilating not only the children, but also reach out to the parents, even if they aren't coming to the school activities and things like that. And of course, challenges arise when a student or a family is not focused on being a Christian or a Lutheran. What can we do? It's not necessarily a bad thing to bring them into the school just because they aren't Christians. My opinion is the school needs to be there first and foremost to raise up the children of the congregation, but that doesn't mean the missionary side of the school is a bad thing. So, but it will have an impact and needs to be anticipated. How are your students going to interact with each other? And sometimes language that isn't typically heard in a school that we're used to. Sometimes new transfer students will bring words that maybe some of our students aren't familiar with, things like that. How are you prepared to deal with that? Eventually it's Dave's words, but I agree, eventually most will find our Lutheran customs and traditions agreeable. Occasionally, there are some that said, this doesn't, I don't like this, but generally, we found, well, we'll get to some case studies, but we found some good progress towards what we've been going through, even though we're not the experts. Yes.
One thing I was thinking of that we tried this year once, and it worked really well, oddly enough, but we actually asked for permission to talk to their school, not just do records back and forth, but actually talk to them on the phone.
Huh?
May we have your permission to visit with the principal, or may we have, and they agreed, and it was a tragic thing, but it really worked well, and they were more than open to it. So sometimes not just looking at a piece of paper from another school, but asking permission to actually speak to them.
You don't have to have permission. If you can ask it, it's fine. You don't have to.
Yeah, but still a good idea whether
If you let them know that, hey,
yeah.
you can probably make a phone call.
So I think sometimes parents just think that all that goes between schools are just the records that they fax or they email or whatever. And I think it was for us, it was very beneficial to have a chance to actually talk with them and get a more personal side of the situation that was coming.
Thank you for that idea. Yes?
Question about when you're saying about non-Lutherans or non-Christians might bring in some other things you might have to deal with in assimilation. And it's always kind of rolling around in my head, like, what's the number? Is there a number? How many new students can you assimilate compared to your student body? Obviously, it's going to be different if they're coming from another school for whatever reason, or another classical school in town, that sort of thing. That's easier. Do you guys have kind of a policy or an idea about
I wish
limits
that
on that?
if we had one, I wish I knew about it, to articulate it.
To
be honest.
Well, it's only a very new thing for St. Paul, so I don't think they've gotten to the point of considering that. They haven't had that many knocks on the door yet, but
That could be a situational thing though too. It could depend on the student coming in, you know. It could depend on where they're coming from, you know, and how, I mean, or if you have a bunch of students coming in that are just hugely behind, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a situational thing, so that's a hard thing to say, okay, well, we're gonna take a percent.
right.
You know,
So
We don't have percentages either in there, but we've dealt with this at various times in the past. For example, we had another private Christian school that closed in the same town, and we picked up quite a few from that particular year. But I can tell you, I mean, we opened up this conference talking about the culture of your school, right? A lot of that type of thing. And the culture of your school is going to change dramatically if you take 20% new students in.
yes,
We'll get to that.
You can't take that many,
yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not, probably most of our schools have taken on a new student at a random grade here and there over the years, but what was really interesting the last 2 years is how many students came into St. Paul's in 6th through 8th grade. And, you know, when my own kids moved to St. Paul's, my oldest was in 2nd grade, and there's a little bit of finagling of things that you got to make work out from one school to the next, and she was Lutheran from a Lutheran school, etc. But even a non-Christian from a public school in 2nd grade, it's a little easier to catch up than the influx of 6th through 8th graders that we had. Some of them were quite behind. Fire thing comes up later.
Yeah.
So I'll let Rebekah talk next about how we dealt with that, especially in those grades.
So some special implications, again, with our heavier influx of 6th through 8th graders, like you said. If a 2nd grader coming in, they're not going to, it's not going to take as much time to catch up with what they've missed. I teach math. When we had these new students come in and we saw standardized test scores and I saw grades, math grades, and I looked at them and I thought, well, what's going on? We use Saxon. So I started with a Saxon placement test, not as the ultimate guide of where they should be, but just to give me some kind of working problems that I can see, show me your work, what do you know, what do you not know. I can't put an 8th grader in algebra just because they're in 8th grade. I had an 8th grader who had no working knowledge of multiplication, any kind of concept of a fraction. I can't just, we can't even keep you in the 6th or 8th grade room really at that point. So then what do you do? A few years back, before we had our larger influx, we had one student that we were able then to just pull her out and work one-on-one. But when we have 3 of them that need some kind of, they need to be at their level, then we started getting a little creative with our schedule. Typically in 6th or 8th grade, the students stay all together. We don't do the, switch around. Well, I guess we do. We have different teachers that are teaching different subjects, but the class is all together. Well, when I have math students that are different levels, then we got creative, and on the back side of our handout, you can see, we had 3 teachers that ended up teaching grades 3 through 8 math, and each one of them taught 2 or 3 levels. And so there was some moving around of all the 3rd through 8th graders. You weren't set in your classroom at that point, you moved around to whatever teacher was going to teach your level. And we were really careful that we did not label them as grades. It was just, we just kept them as their Saxon titles. Saxon 7-6, you're going to see Mrs. Greco now. So I'm not even sure that our incoming students knew what technical grade level they were in math. So some implications there, we were able to then also tie that in with Latin. 6th or 8th grader coming in for Latin, none of them had anything. Closest, Spanish? Was there anything else?
No.
No.
Passing familiarity with other things.
Yeah, so again, we're not going to keep them in the 6th or 8th grade room with the others that are now reading text in Latin relatively fluently.
Yeah.
So Latin then became a separate subject that we it took a lot of tweaking, I'll be honest. It took a lot of tweaking. Our school is not very big. You can see our grade level distribution there in the middle of the page. So when we only have to deal with 1 or 2 students that had to move around in one classroom, it took some time, but we found a way that all of the students were able to get to their math level that was appropriate for them, and also the Latin level that was appropriate for where they were. It worked. Now, I will say we only did this was only done last year. I think it worked really well for us. It would need some tweaking from year to year because it would depend on who we had, but last year it worked well. Yes?
What does independent mean?
Okay, so let's look at 6th or 8th grader Mrs. Koester, that's me. So in the middle, you see Algebra 1 half lesson and Saxon 5-4 independent. That was where, so we only had 30 minutes instruction time, unfortunately. So 30 minutes of me teaching the whole group. And then they would still have an additional 30 minutes with me in the room that they could work on they were working on homework. This past year was interesting. If you see that Algebra 1 half and Saxon 5-4, that's a big, that's a big one. That was a difficult chunk for me. But I also had Algebra 1 students in the room at the same time. So my younger ones knew to go to the older students for help. So they were still able to get most of their homework done in class, and they had peers to help them. Depending on where I was in the lesson, I could maybe still jump in and go back to them and help with homework at that point too. So independent was just kind of their study hall or work on your homework. Okay. All right, so we'd like to know, what are some other, have you had any scheduling things that you've been able to do that worked really well? Oh, you're laughing. Or didn't work well, we'll take that.
And I can tell you that these ones that aren't on the same level are the bane of the existence of people that have to make schedules. But we started doing, like, I do the 6th through 12th grade schedule at our school. And we started doing a class that we call Latin for new students, for the ones coming in at the high school level that have never had Latin before, because there's no possible way to throw them in with kids that have been doing it since 3rd grade. And the goal of it was to basically try to get them most of the way through relock in 1 year. Because it was a smaller class, that was the idea, was to try to get them most of the way through. I think we made it 3/4 of the way through with the group from this last year, so we got pretty close to ready to jump into the next level with that. But it is a scheduling issue because, you know, you can't have a teacher teach 2 classes at the same time. And and there's a finite number of periods in every day. It's a challenge. And we've also talked about, sometimes they've arranged with the teacher to do tutoring over the summer to try to get up on pace, because it just gets more and more complicated the further up they move as they go through it. But we've done that class as well, so we've done that type of thing. With math, we don't have students quite as varied as what you do. I'm looking at Saxon 7, 6, and you've got 5 different grade levels taking that. We're not that far, that complicated with that. We only allow basically 1 year of advancement on that. But we still, like 2 of my sons made it all the way to Calc 3, and we had students made it to Calc 3 and differential mathematics and so on and so forth, college level classes that went through the math program there as well. But you basically just have to make sure that we have multiple teachers that are teaching it, so we're like that. Well, we did until Wilmer took his call. Now we'll have to figure that out, because his wife was teaching the regular 8th grade class while Pastor Peter teaches the one. We'll have to figure that out. But you just have to kind of coordinate it and figure out where.
We have a smaller school, and so part of what I've done is just make all of our teachers teach every subject, and then you can have a math block. All the kids just go to a class, and teachers are teaching 2 math classes, kind of like you have here, and then hour block with each, and then back and forth. But that makes it a little easier. It's not, it's not simplifying it exactly. Then you're dealing with who can teach which levels of which subjects.
So it works that way well, but the thinking behind what we did here, Rebekah's only part-time, only teaching math.
Right.
So that made it possible to do something like this. Scott is the expert at Latin.
None of us want to take Latin away from him.
and he enjoys teaching it, so why?
So you got the, that's just works for you.
I used to have 8-7 and 7-6 Saxon in the same room for 2 years. I did that. But the problem that we had was that I had multiple sections on that first Latin class, and then even though I could give personal attention to students with different availabilities during the day, it wasn't the most salutary use of me as a resource to the school. You should probably get memory work.
So even though the new kids coming into a school have very often had very little religion, maybe no religion, depending on if they went to church, if they were members of a church or not. Most of them didn't have much to do with memory work, and so we had a relatively rigorous program of memory work from preschool on up through 8th grade, and preschoolers don't have too much trouble. I mean, just the same whether they came from the church or not, they're capable of it. The 8th graders, if you get a new 8th grader, a lot harder to do memory work. Chapel is very new for them, and we had people who didn't know how to sit still, of course, for something like that, and yet, from my experience, chapel, of course, all the other benefits aside, you of course have your connection to God's Word, but chapel does have a lot of other benefits. It teaches students how to sit still when you do it well, and it teaches them attention spans. They get more music that way than just in the music class, etc. So things like that the older kids didn't grow up in that culture. They, of course, had to learn it. We have a chapel buddy system where the older ones help the younger ones. Well, when the older ones don't know how to do it themselves, you have to start partnering them with some of the middle grade students, and it's been interesting. I suppose Scott can add a little bit more about how choir ties into that in a moment, maybe, but some other additional thoughts from Dave regarding this. Public schools are not neutral. If you are not for Jesus Christ, then you are against him, and that is happening in public schools. He was a public school teacher for a number of years before he came to teach for us at St. Paul's after being a member there.
Likewise.
So he knows from firsthand experience. Kids have essentially been given over to the devil. I think students who come to our school realize the difference quickly and benefit from this. The love of Jesus Christ is powerful, and we honor this and teach it to our students for their good. The result, students that not only know subject matter, but the result is students that not only know the subject matter, but also get a strong foundation in the Bible and God, which will help them tremendously. Yeah, something sounds funny there, so. All right. So, other thoughts or questions that you have tying in new students to memory work? I guess we didn't say really what we did. That was a struggle. Scott does some memory work. I did some memory work with catechism class. He did it with religion, and they had these different assignments of memory work all at once, and we dealt with it in different ways. But that was really a challenge, and as the case studies illustrate, it really kind of depends on how much of a role the parents took in that, because what 8th grader is going to do study memory work quite in the way that we expect. But maybe we'll get more to that in the case study. But any thoughts or ideas that you've used to help your incoming, especially upgrade students, deal with those changes from what they're used to church-wise?
Well, one of the things I appreciate about my school is that there is a memory, book, and so if the transfer comes in, they can see the memory work that's been learned so far that year, and they can see in bite-sized pieces what's coming up. So at least it's upfront about what they're going to be experiencing, and upfront about what they've missed. They can just read it.
Sure. Yeah, something that I would have really liked to have seen is that we interact with these families more over the summer before they come in, but most of the time they aren't coming in early enough to do that. And of course, we're all busy too. But yeah, if where that's possible, that's very helpful.
I've even had it, looping back to the admissions idea, I have thought if we have a family, a prospective family, we say, okay, we're going to give you a very easy memory task. Let's say you have this family with you for an hour and a half worth of visit, or maybe even an hour. It's like, okay, repeat after me. We should fear, love, and trust in God above all things. Come back an hour later. Do you remember that sentence that I told you? This is the kind of memory work that you do, and that's maybe a pass-fail test that you go, oh, maybe, it can give you an idea of how that student might do. It's not going to be a make or break maybe, but it's contributes to some decisions perhaps.
Any other thoughts on
in Houston, we do Learn by Heart, which is a big book for the whole year. But we also say the memory at least 3 times a day, incorporate together, not working at it, just saying it. And so they've heard it at least 12, probably 16 times before Friday's test. And then we also, some of our students are 504, have special plans to go with that, where they get a word bank. So my assimilation students, when they first got there, started with the word bank, just as a little extra, little gift for you.
Yeah.
Eventually it went away.
Are those written tests then?
We can, yes, those were written tests, but I can also do oral.
So,
I think I was supposed to do mostly oral, but.
So my challenge with that, at St. Paul's, there's the whole school, and it's gradual how much they need to learn according to age, but we started a few years back, the whole school working on the same thing every week. That's changed week from week. But I, as the catechism teacher, had additional to that. By the time they got to 6th through 8th grade, the expectation was you should have some of these patterns down. You should be able to do a little bit more than just what we're doing together to help you try and learn how to do this on your own after you leave us. And I only taught them 1 hour a week, so I couldn't be there to help them repeat it repeatedly. They needed to do it on their own or they would have trouble.
Morning recitations, lunchtime recitations,
Yeah.
afternoon.
Yeah. So for the rest of the school, it was repeated like that. And what I assigned, a lot of it was part of that, but at a different time, so to come back and repeat it at a different time of the year or things like that. But there were new scripture passages too.
I'm just curious, has anybody made like a memory book of the recitation that's learned throughout the grades? I mean, would that be too cumbersome to give to transfer families?
As in just all the memory work? I mean, the whole...
Well, I mean, like, the recitation, you know, the things that you do to really cement that stuff into their brains. But there's recitation, I'm sure, for, you know, kindergarten.
We've put a lot together. I don't know that we've
I just wonder,
ever handed it out.
has anybody compiled it?
We should. Just maybe fail.
We have
a book.
We have a book of recitation that we do, and that we call it SQS. And that includes the Learn by Heart, the timeline, math, science, literature recitation, and even separated Latin. It's separated between a early grammar, upper grammar, and logic, so they each have a different section. And the logic section also uses those recitations for what we call oratio eloquentium, which is a speech presentation competition, plus some extra, more difficult. So there's piles of over and over and over and over and over again, to where I've had high school students come back and their assignment was charge of the light brigade, and as soon as the teacher was assigned it, they said that day, can I just say it now and be done with it? And killed it and walked away, mic drop, walk away, and it's fun.
I mean, for us at St. Paul's, I had started a rotation, a 5-year rotation, so that by the time they went through all the grades, they hit everything more than once. But it was a work in progress, and part of it required the participation of other teachers. I did the parts I knew I could do, but it wasn't complete. So it depended on the teacher, how the teacher used it. Yeah, it should be done. So we have some case studies then to show how all of what we've dealt with at St. Paul's, how it impacts the culture of the school. And I want to first talk of one particular student who came to us second quarter of her 7th grade year. And that was now almost 2 years ago. So she had 3 quarters in 7th grade and then all of 8th grade, and now she's graduated and gone on to high school. She came in at a pretty low level, frustrated with the public schools' inability to help her with the individual attention she needed.
That's in Catholic school too.
Okay. So her sister didn't transfer in with her younger sister, and I don't understand all the details from that, but she was there, trouble getting the attention she needed, and couldn't keep up, and was struggling very much when she came to us, but we were happy to take her in, and it was a struggle for a while, a lot of bad grades, and her mother, was it 1 quarter or 2 quarters after putting her in the school, was really seriously considering taking her back out because she just couldn't keep up. But she was determined on her own, and her mother, I think sometimes was able to help her more than other times, but was a great resource for her. I wasn't sure she'd be back for 8th grade, but they did re-enroll her. She'd made a lot of friends, and one in particular, there was, St. Paul's only had one person in that grade for many years. There'd be somebody who'd come in, leave, another person jump in that grade and leave, and another person jump in that grade and leave, well, I don't know how many times that happened, but eventually this girl came and she stuck it out, and they had 2 graduate together. But the fact that they could be great friends and they got together outside of school, they studied together, and they helped each other, and that's our great success story. So let's see if there's anything else Dave wanted to say about that. She was very unorganized, somewhat scatterbrained, but then gradually started to improve in the quality of her work and the ability to turn in assignments on time. A friend helped her greatly. And if she had left and gone somewhere else, what's the likelihood that she would have found a friend capable of doing that? And I've seen people leave our school and still members, and they're still taking catechism classes, and their academic abilities decreased compared to those who were low at our school, and I've never seen anybody turn around for her ability to do memory work like she did. But she had her own motivation, her mother's periodic motivation, and that great friend that she might not have had anywhere else that really helped her. So I'll let Scott talk about some of the other ones. Well, I guess, so there was, I guess I'll add a little more to one of them. A couple of brothers, 2nd grade and kindergarten, right? Came in very high energy. I never got more hugs from anybody than that kindergartner in all the years I've been at St. Paul's. Rebekah was his chapel buddy, because I assigned that particularly because I knew he would. When he came for registration, when I saw how hard it was for his mother to get him out of the gym to go home, I said, Rebekah's got to be his chapel buddy, because I don't know who else is going to do it. She got so many hugs. It was great. But it was a bigger challenge than we exactly knew how to deal with. And kind of awfully sad how that ended up. Scott can add some more, and he's got a couple others he wants to talk about.
I wish it were all sunshine and roses with this particular case. I have been assigned to do writing road to reading with that particular classroom, and there were continual disruptions, and one of the things that I had to spend an awful lot of time in that classroom was drilling our 5 rules, which are part of the culture of the school. Listen the first time, obey right away, respect people and property, do your personal best, keep a place for everything and everything in its place. I would be reciting with the students and having them come in, and we have it at our school that if a teacher says listen the first time, you're going to have a chorus of students say obey right away, because they know that's what the next words are going to be. These words never sunk in with these 2 boys, sadly. And it was very strange throughout the day how belligerent they could become, and there was certainly at least one parent or parental figure who was enabling this kind of behavior, and I'm not sure how we would have screamed against it at the admissions side of it, because things were looking pretty peachy at the beginning, and then you hear a couple of things that are like, oh, this woman thinks she's a pastor. Oh, what? Who said that to who? And did they hear about that? And so I'm not privy to all the details, but did they even make it to 3rd quarter? I think they did, and then they were, I'm not exactly sure if they left of their own volition, or we said things. I wasn't down the board at that point.
He was proposing to the board that they just stormed out, basically.
Lord have mercy. We've had other transfer students who have done fairly well. Some students, here's a mixed outcome. We have a student who came as a 6th grader who struggled academically, was never a behavior problem, but really had some issues with being known for anything particularly good. This guy was pretty good with a yo-yo, but one of my delights as the chess club sponsor was he would come in and he knew basically nothing about chess, and he learned so quickly, absorbed it so fast. He was proud, beyond proud, at the end of the year that he earned the award Most Improved Player. And you could tell he had nothing else going for him except he was the most improved player. And it was like, I made his year. It's like, dude, you made my year as the chess club sponsor. This is awesome. But I have to be frank with some students. This student consistently did not pass memory work. And I kept reminding this student, you have the perfect system in place for the results you've been getting. You're not doing the work, you're not going to get the reward. I'd also like to highlight with the small time that we have remaining, we have had some positive outcomes with transfer students with learning disabilities, but in truth, it really takes all of us to help those students along. And this particular student is absolutely a sweetheart that has some very serious decoding issues when it comes to phonograms and the like. So there have been volunteers. We've been able to get volunteers to come in and help this particular student. We have two members of our congregation, mother and daughter, older than me, but the daughter is blind, and the two were helping each other read. One reading Braille, they would find titles of books, the same books, and they would read it together, and that was a very fruitful relationship. And he certainly wasn't my best reader. I had him for religion class. Sadly, we had to back him out of the Latin curriculum, but the kid could read the Bible. That's a win. That's absolutely a win. I would like to talk about culture, but I don't know that I could improve upon what Pastor Paul said so ably yesterday. If you get a chance to review that after the conference, or if you did not get to go through that, it's definitely well worth your time. But one of the things that to wrap this up with the idea of assimilation, what are some organizations that are truly excellent at assimilating new people? And I had to think to myself, I was a member of one for 4 years. I was a 4-year member of the Marching Illini, the marching band of the University of Illinois. And if you think about it, every single student, every single new player that they have come in is a transfer student. Now granted, there is a high standard that is set by, did you make it into the University of Illinois? That's a decently high standard. But you have students from other marching band programs who are coming in and they march according to, they have been taught different ways to march, different ways to respond with vocals, and we had to deal with those sorts of things, but we had zero issues. What you have at the bottom of your handout in back, I've inserted a paragraph that comes from Director Emeritus of the Marching Illini, Gary Smith. He is the Smith of Smith-Walbridge Clinics. If you've heard of this organization, they do leadership training for drum majors out of Eastern Illinois University and also I think University of Florida, correct me if I'm wrong. But this paragraph that you see is on the inside cover of a syllabus booklet for the Marching Illini. And I think this is something of a rhetorical masterpiece, and I'd like to read it to you. This idea is system plus spirit equals success. The two most important attributes of a successful marching band, or you could think possibly a school, are spirit and system. A system is a way of doing things. It represents the total structure of the band, such as organization, procedures, activities, philosophies, teaching methods, marching and playing style, and policies. Spirit represents how individual band members respond to the system. It includes practice habits, good attitudes, mental discipline, commitment, responsibility, dependability, and hard work. Success is the result of a good spirit and system. Success generates its own byproducts such as pride, enthusiasm, loyalty, discipline, and dedication. So, inserting those ideas into a classical Lutheran school, I think, has some merit. You can read what those words are in the handout, or possibly tweak them on your own. But I think this is, that maybe perhaps oversimplifies all of the beautiful things that Pastor Paul said yesterday with getting, what are we assimilating students into? We're assimilating them into the culture of the way Lutherans educate their own. And it is a path to life. Are there, I also have at the bottom of the page, answering the question about percentages, Joshua Gibbs wrote in May 2023 about that idea, fencing the classical Christian table, and I have a URL for that on the handout as well. He has some very pointed things to say about how many you can absorb and how that affects the culture, and I cannot improve upon what he said. Are there any other questions before we go to the group as we wrap up? I'd like to thank Pastor and Rebekah Koester for joining this, and St. Paul's Brookfield's loss is Christ Sterling's gain, so thank you very much for working with us on that. And thank you all for your time.